If you need to build a CI/CD pipeline with CircleCI, this is the video for you. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to walk through building out a pipeline using a workflow and a job that will build our documentation website from the last video and then deploy it to Google App Engine with each commit to our master branch. Hey folks, Sid here with DevOps Directive, bringing you the information you need to level up your DevOps and cloud infrastructure skill set. I produce a lot of videos, both informational as well as tutorial like this one, so if you're new around here, consider subscribing. Without further ado, let's get into it. So first I'm going to, just like last time, go through and create a listing of the steps to accomplish this. So that's the rough outline of what we need to do. We basically need to link our GitHub repo to CircleCI and authorize CircleCI to be able to see when we make changes to that repo. That will trigger these workflows. Then I'm just going to follow their documentation to set up sort of a hello world minimal workflow. We then need to be able to build our documentation from within the workflow itself. We need to set up some service account to the Google Cloud project that will have authorization to actually deploy to our project. And then we need to deploy from within that CircleCI workflow. Okay, so let's start by going to our CircleCI project here, and we can link it to the repo. I've already connected my GitHub account. You'll have to do that first, but we can see all the different repositories here, and we'll just click Setup Project. They give you the option to add this config automatically, and what that would do would add this config to your project on a branch, and then you could go working from there. I'm just going to do add manually, and what you do is you create a .circleci directory and then a config.yaml file within there, and that's how we actually define what CircleCI needs to do in its pipeline. So I'm going to do that now. And then within this config.yaml file, we're going to define two things. We're going to define a workflow, and that workflow is going to say each time we push to the master branch, run this set of jobs. And then we're going to define that job, and that job is going to contain the logic where we actually build our documentation site and deploy it to Google App Engine. So the first step is going to be to set up that boilerplate code and to create just sort of a hello world workflow that's going to not do any of our actual logic, but just echo hello world so we can confirm whether we have the workflow set up correctly or not. That's just the version of CircleCI's API that we're going to use. This is the name of the workflow itself. Then we're going to list out the jobs within that workflow. And I'm just going to name it job and workflow to make this clear. That would be enough, I think, all by itself, but we only want to run this when we push to the master branch, not to any other branches. So we're actually going to add a filters here, and that's going to be filters on branches only master. And so what this says is whenever I add this to my repo and push it, CircleCI is only going to run this workflow when it is the master branch that receives that push. First, I need to define this job that actually gets run. These jobs actually execute within Docker containers themselves. So here you specify which Docker image you want to use. For this hello world step, I'm just going to use an Ubuntu image, and that should work fine. I'm just going to echo back hello world. So really we could even use a much lighter weight image. Like BusyBox is another lightweight Linux image that should work. So let's just try that actually. So the image is BusyBox, and then we need to define the steps within this workflow. And the steps within this workflow, we're going to run name, hello world, command, going to be echo hello world. So I think that is all we need, but let's check the formatting on that. So you can install it using this curl command. I've already done that. And now, let's see, validating a config, that's what we want to do. I'm going to do CircleCI config validate, and it doesn't like something. Only one sub-schema matches out of 2. Oh, here, because we could specify multiple jobs here, I need a dash because it is jobs is an array. Okay, that makes sense. So let's try that again. And now it's valid. Awesome. So I'm going to commit this, and then we'll go back into CircleCI, and we'll hopefully see that it runs this, and we'll get a hello world output. Okay, so we can see my latest commit. We'll go over to CircleCI and see this pipeline is now running. We can click into here and see the various steps as it brings them up. It's grabbing the Docker container image, preparing environment variables, and hello world. Awesome. So now what we need to do is actually build up this config to include the rest of our logic that we're going to need to actually do our deployment. We did this, we did this. Now we'll need to build the docs within that workflow. And while I chose that BusyBox image, I'm actually going to use a different Docker image. Google provides a Docker image that contains their command line utility pre-installed, this Google Cloud SDK image, and it is Debian based. So if we go here, we can see that they're actually building it from Debian, so it's a Linux-based container image where they install the gcloud command line utility and a bunch of additional utilities that we can leverage. And so I'm going to start from this as my base image. So I can just replace that, Google Cloud SDK. And now instead of running hello world, I'm going to add a couple of other steps. The first step is just going to be checkout. So this is a CircleCI shorthand. It's going to grab the code from the repo itself. So I'm going to need to do that so that I have access to it. The second step is going to be to actually install Sphinx and the read the docs theme that I was using. And so that is going to be our first step here. We're going to install Sphinx, and we're going to do apt install -y python -pip. And so once we're inside of our container, we're going to run these two commands sequentially. That's going to give us the Sphinx package installed and then the theme that we want installed. And so I think that should be good. Let's just make sure that that runs successfully within CircleCI. So again, let's get out of here. Let's first check that our configuration is valid. It is. Then we're going to commit and push this. We see it's already picked it up and it's running it. So now that we've successfully deployed our installed our dependencies within that workflow container, we're going to add another step where we actually build the documentation. So if we go here, we'll just say run. That'll be name, build docs, command. And so the command that we want to run here is actually going to call this make file with make HTML, and that's going to build the documentation in this build/HTML directory. And so I'm going to do ls on .build/html. And the goal here will be for it to have built these files from the source. And then we're going to list out and ideally see the files like this within the container running on CircleCI. Okay, so we got a green check mark. That's a good sign. We ran Sphinx, and then we see within here it did indeed build those files. Awesome. The next step, as we stated here, actually deploy it to Google Cloud. And so the way that we allow CircleCI to authenticate to Google Cloud is through what's called a service account. So if we go into our Google Cloud Platform console, this is just the App Engine. We can see we have our documentation deployed here. We're going to go to, on the left-hand side, I am an admin, and then service accounts. And we're going to create a new service account. Let's call it CircleCI App Engine Deployer. And then we're going to have to grant it a variety of roles. These roles are how you define within Google Cloud what someone or something is allowed to do. So there's a few that are required here. And I'm going to add those now. And so now we need to actually get the credentials for this service account and put them into CircleCI for it to use. So let's actually start by downloading that key to our local file system. So if we go here to service accounts, we can click on this 3 buttons here on the right and say create key. And the type that we want is JSON. I'm going to copy this value, and then CircleCI actually allows us to include environment variables that it protects so that it doesn't show these to anyone. So this is a secret key, so don't go posting this anywhere, and don't check it into your repo. But we'll go here to project settings, and then environment variables. Then we're going to add an environment variable, and this we'll call gcloud service key. And then the value is going to be this entire JSON string here, and I'm just going to add that in. And so as you can see here, it obscures the values so that it doesn't actually display those in plain text. And it does the same thing within your pipeline. It won't display that in plain text either. So now we need to use this within our pipeline, and we're going to do that. Let's go back to our config.yaml. We're going to add a step, and this one is going to be name to app engine command. And here's where we're going to take advantage of those gcloud commands that were included in that container image. So this is going to tell it which project to use. This is going to tell it which region we deployed into. And then this is going to actually do the deployment. It shouldn't work because it's not authorized to do so, but let's go ahead and check in and see what kind of errors we get. And so we got that error because we didn't pass it an account to use. So it's saying to use the auth login. The alternative is that we can actually tell it to use the service account credentials, which will grant it access to those roles that we applied to that service account. So we're going to do that now. And the way that we're going to do that is we're actually going to use the the environment variable that we defined with this $ curly braces syntax. So it was gcloud service account. and there's a gcloud auth command. And so this was what I tried initially, was just to echo out the server's account credentials, and then pipe those with this vertical bar into this command, and then pass the key file a dash, which says just use the output of the previous command. And I got an error, basically stating that gcloud, sorry, this is auth. That gcloud auth command assumes if you pass it as a string that it is a P12 type key, when really we have a JSON type key, so it fails. So the way that I got around this is just to create a temporary file. So I still echo it out, but now instead of piping it into that command, I write it to a temporary file by redirecting it with this caret or greater than sign. And so I'll write it to, let's say, temp service account key.json. And so that will put it there. And so then this next command, I'm just going to read in from that temporary file, /temp service account key.json. And then just because this is a sensitive password, yes, the file system on these containers doesn't persist long term, but there's no harm in removing it directly after we use it. So let's go ahead and delete. So we'll do remove /temp /JSON. And so now we're taking our environment variable, putting it into this file, passing that file to our gcloud auth command, deleting that file, and then calling the commands which require that authorization. Okay, so it looks like that failed, and I realized after doing it that I used gcloud service account as the environment variable, but when I actually defined that environment variable, it was gcloud service key, I believe. So of course it could not find the file. I named it the wrong thing. So I'll go back here and just edit that to service key. And again, we will commit and fix and we'll fix the name of that and push it again and see if that does the trick. So it gave us a API not enabled, and so that is true. We'll actually need to go into our project and turn on that API, which will enable us to deploy via it. So I'll just follow this link that they gave me. Quick enable, should only take a few seconds. And now I'm just going to go back here and click rerun from within the workflow. Okay, it looks like it successfully deployed. So now we want to test that by making some modification to our site, committing it, and then seeing if it shows up on the live version of the website. This SSH session will continue running in the background, so I'm actually going to kill this just so that stops. And so hopefully, if everything's working properly, we will see that change that I just made to this index file show up in the heading here. Okay, uploaded. Now let's refresh the page. Aha! Our change has made it in. And so with that, we now have a CI/CD pipeline, the CI component of building the docs with each change to the master branch, and then the CD component, the deployment, using that gcloud app deploy command with our service account credentials to get those changes live onto our website. whenever we make a change to our code base or the documentation config, we can just push it to master. CircleCI will pick up that change and run this workflow and this job and deploy that just a few minutes later.
And there we have it, a simple CI/CD workflow that will ensure our documentation website remains up to date. If you found this video useful, hit the like button. It really helps the channel out. That's all for today. I hope to see you in the next one.